You've had a diverse career. So, as you can see on your wall, you've done a radio show. You're also a professor at Canisius College.
An associate professor at Canisius College, political science, since the fall of 1989.
And you were a county legislator as well.
I was a county legislator. I was in a former life back in Binghamton before we moved to Buffalo to get the job with Canisius. I was a school board member and a town board member. School board was Susquehanna Valley. Town board was Town of Binghamton. School board, I was elected at the age of 18. I was still a senior in high school. On the day I was elected, it was my last day of classes, June 11th, 1975. In fact, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of that a week from Wednesday. I was elected. It was the only day I ever had detention. I had detention, and I was elected the same day to a 3-year term on the school board. Then 3 years later, when I was 21 and a junior at Binghamton, I ran for a seat on the Town of Binghamton Town Board and was elected there, served 2 terms. They were 2 4-year terms, 8 years there, and I was off and running.
What made you decide to get into politics?
You know, I think I attribute a lot to my family. My dad was a union president. He was a lineman for New York State Electric and Gas, NYSEG. He was a union president, IBEW 1125, which got him involved in what was going on. I mean, I knew from a very early age, given my family and their involvement, that politics matters, that elections matter. And I had a natural interest in it. When I was a sophomore in high school in the fall of 1972, October of 1972, my teachers went on strike for 6 weeks. And during that time, the school board decided to keep the schools open with permanent substitutes for 6 weeks until the strike was resolved, the contract was resolved. It was a hell of a 6 weeks. Not a lot of learning went on there. It was very emotional. You know, your teachers, all of your teachers are out on strike. The kids are drawn into that conflict. When I was a senior in high school, I was the student council's representative to the Board of Education. You know, you just go there and you give reports. You don't even sit with the board. You sit in the audience, but every month they call on you. And the teacher's contract, which had been resolved 3 years earlier after the strike, had expired, and they were working without a contract again. And there was talk that they might be going on another strike. This time, though, rather than October, it would be more like May and June, just before the Regents exams. Students obviously were politically motivated. They were politicized by the whole thing. And that's when I decided to run for the Board of Education. And shortly after I announced my candidacy, the contract was resolved. Now, whether my stepping into the fray had anything to do with it or not, I would love to take credit for it, but, we'll never know. That got me involved at a very early age. And then when I went to Binghamton, I was political science. I had it set up my first semester so I could go either pre-med or pre-law. Chemistry and calculus made me decide I should go pre-law, and I never went to law school, obviously. I did major in political science, and it's furthered my career in government.
So what made you take the jump to run for legislator?
You know what? I was a city councilman in the city of Tonawanda for 6 years. I was first elected in 1995. And my last term expired in 2001. There were 3 2-year terms. I had decided to run for Erie County Legislature in 2001, and I lost to the then chair of the Erie County Legislature. I ran again in 2003, won a primary against him because he had switched parties. He went from Democrat to Republican. I won the Republican primary but lost the general election to him. He won on minor party lines. About that time, or shortly thereafter, the county was thrown into a budgetary crisis that ended up with county almost going bankrupt and getting a control board. That was the budget of 2005. At that time, I was oftentimes on radio and TV. I was their go-to political expert for the radio and TV stations locally. I pitched the program director at WBN for a public affairs program, kind of modeled after Tim Russert's Meet the Press, and we ended up doing that in 2005. Called it Hardline with Hardwick. He came up, Tim Wenger, the program director then at BEN, came up with that title. I loved it. Started out as a 1-hour program, was very successful on Sunday mornings, went to a 2-hour program from 10 to noon, and I did that up until I decided to run for county legislature again in 2009, and this time I gave up the program, ran for county legislature, and was successful this time, and was reelected there, served 6 2-year terms, 12 years, and then I decided to run for Erie County Comptroller 4 years ago and was fortunate enough to win that election. That's after switching parties, after going from Republican Party, switching over in 2019 to become a Democrat.
So 2 questions from that. I do want to talk first about your experience. How has your experience overall shaped your approach to public service?
Well, you know what, I grew, I teach political science. I still teach political science, a course a day during the school year at Canisius. 8 o'clock I teach, and then I run downtown at 9 or shortly thereafter. In my presidency class that I teach, I talk about some concepts, and one of the concepts is David Barber's psychological approach to the study of the presidency. And he talks about various components of it. And one of the components he talks about is the president's worldview and how that develops during adolescence or early adulthood. And president's worldview that he picks up in his formative years, adolescence, early adulthood, is a function of what's going around him. So, and it impacts him later on. For instance, George H.W. Bush, George Bush 41, the father, was a pilot in the Pacific, youngest pilot in the Pacific in World War II. Flying off for the Navy, off of carriers, got shot down twice. Saw many of his friends killed. That was during his formative years, and it had an impact. World War II and the causes of World War II, namely appeasement, Neville Chamberlain at Munich, had an impact on him later on, years later, decades later, when he was president. And he was not going to appease a dictator, Saddam Hussein, in the same way that Neville Chamberlain appeased Hitler. So what you pick up in the things going on around you during those formative years is going to have an impact on you well later down the road. Well, in my case, it was, what was going around me and my interest in politics and everything certainly stemmed from the Nixon administration. When Nixon was first elected president in 1972, I was a sophomore in high school, the same year that my teachers were going on strike. So politics was all around me, and the Watergate scandal, and I remember the following summer of 73, and then into 74, watching unfold before me the Watergate scandal. First it was the Washington Post piece, Woodward and Bernstein, but then they select a committee on the Watergate affair. That was gavel-to-gavel coverage the summer of 73 on all 3 networks. And you watched this thing unfold, and it was just so fascinating. And, my teacher's on strike. Politics matters there. Politics matters, what's going on the federal level. Of course, I grew up during the Vietnam War. Saigon fell. The Vietnam War officially ended for good about a month before I graduated from high school. 2 years before I graduated from high school, again, about the same time Watergate was unfolding, my teachers were on strike, the U.S. involvement in Vietnam ended. So, I learned very on. I was impressed. Politics matters. And I was always one of those people that, rather than sitting on the sidelines and heckling, or just observing what's going on, I wanted to get involved. I played baseball in high school, and rather than sitting on the bench, when the game was on the line, I wanted to be the person with my bat in the hand, with 2 outs in the last inning and, the bases loaded. I'd rather participate in it than watch it. And that carried through to my approach to politics and government.
So that active participation and that I guess drive to want to do something, has that shaped your how you see your role as comptroller?
Yeah, well, I have decades now of experience as a public official, as an elected official, as a participant in the policy process, as a policymaker. And I've learned lessons, when I'm not as certainly aggressive, some would say arrogant maybe, as I was 30 years ago, when I thought I knew everything and I knew what was best and it was my way or the highway. I've learned that there's a great benefit to working with people to get things done, that other people have good ideas too. I'd like to say that I've been a fighter in the past, and I'm willing to fight for people. When you run for office, you say, I'm going to fight for you, I'm going to fight for you, and I'm going to fight for this, or I'm going to fight for that. And I'd like to say that, I'm willing to fight for you, certainly, and I'm very good at it, but I would much rather than fight for someone, I would rather work with others to get something done for everybody. I think in the long run, that's more productive, more beneficial. That's certainly one of the lessons I've taken from my life in politics, that, sometimes you have to take a step back and you have to try to find common ground and you have to work with people to get things done. It's much more satisfying when you can do that, especially with people who you might be prone to fight with. If you can actually, sit down with them and talk things through and get things done together, in the end, that makes for a much more lasting solution. Because if you get what you want by beating someone else into the ground, they're going to come back at a later point in time and try to get what they want. And it's going to be this back and forth, which isn't going to be good for anybody. So yeah, I'm willing to fight. I'm very good at it. But I would prefer to work with others to get things done. In the end, I think that works out better, again, for everybody.
Now, during your time as county legislator, you said in 2019 you switched from Republican to Democrat.
Yes.
What made you shift?
There were a few things going on. First of all, the Republican Party that I joined way back in the day when, George H.W. Bush, who was one of my political heroes. He was only a one-term president, but God, what a nice guy. And he did try to work with others, and I thought he was an excellent president. One of the things that impressed me about Bush the father the most, was after getting beaten in the 92 election by Bill Clinton. He could have just packed it up and been bitter and said, screw it, and in that lame duck term, done nothing. I remember there was this civil war going on in Angola, and, every night on TV, we would watch these kids starving before our eyes. There were journalists there, and they were showing us these emaciated kids and mothers holding their kids and their dead kids, and it was just awful. People were starving, and Bush could have said, "Screw it," let Clinton handle that. Instead, what he did is he sent in U.S. troops on a peacekeeping mission, on a humanitarian mission to get those people food and medicine and save people, and he did it. Now that mission later expanded under Clinton, and it became picking sides, in state building, and I think Clinton messed it up, and that's where we got Black Hawk Down, and then we pulled out of there, and the thing was probably worse than when it started. But I give Bush, the father, a lot of credit. He was defeated. He didn't have to do that. He could have thrown the crisis into the lap of the person who had just beaten him. But instead, he stepped up and he did the right thing. Under circumstances that many of us would have said, hell with them, The people they showed me they didn't want me. I'm bitter. I don't want anything to do with it. No, he stepped up. That was the Republican Party that I was a part of back in, the late 80s, early 90s. or actually early 80s. And by the time I left the Republican Party in 2019, it was the party of Trump. I was surprised that Trump won. I was supporting John Kasich, former governor of Ohio, a good man who I knew. We had a lecture series at Canisius College. I was the chair of that lecture series at the time. We brought Kasich in. This was a year or two before he ran for president. And I actually drove him up with my wife to Niagara Falls. He wanted to see Niagara Falls, spend some time with him. Liked the guy a lot. He was a moderate Republican, a decent human being. And, the Republican Party, there was this hostile takeover by Trump. Initially, I said, okay, we'll give the guy a chance. And I didn't think it was going to go well. I thought it was going to crash and burn within a year or two. But after a year or two, it became apparent that no, it wasn't going to crash and burn. Because I wanted to be around to pick up the pieces when it crashed and burned. And the post-Trump Republican Party, but it was apparent that wasn't going to happen. And it only got worse and worse. At the same time, I was also having some trouble with some people in the Republican Party locally. So it was a combination of, the national issues and the Trump takeover and some things that were happening locally. And I decided finally it was time. I reached out to some friends on the Democratic side, and one thing led to another, and I made the transition. It was very, very tough. It didn't go over well, and they raked me through the coals for a while. But in the long run, I think it was worth it. I'm happy where I am now. Still have a lot of friends who are Republicans. Still have a lot of people I respect over there and respect me. And regardless, I'm going to work together with everybody, because that's how we get things done.
Now, I do want to ask about some of those local issues. What were if you don't mind me asking?
I think that the straw that broke the camel's back was the 2019 budget. It was December of 2018. The county legislature, Republicans were in control, but we were in control by one vote. It was a 6-5 majority. So any one of us, and of course I was the one that was the swing vote in that, because I could go over on occasion and side with the Democrats, and I did on several occasions, and obviously the Republicans weren't happy with me. 2019 budget, which we're voting on in December of 2018, the Republicans wanted to cut the budget for Erie County. The county executive didn't want to see this happen, felt that this would really hamper, put a crimp in many of the essential county services, especially the roads, which were important to me because I had a lot of county roads in my district, as did the other Republicans. So there was a standoff going. I met with the county executive, and I put together a deal that I thought I could deal with. If we made certain changes to the budget, I would vote against the cuts. I brought that back to the Republicans, saying, "Hey, this is better for all of us. We can, we'll get more money for roads that we want. Our constituents would be better served." They were upset because they wanted to, it was a partisan thing. They wanted to hurt the incumbent county executive, Mark Poloncarz, right before he was going to run for re-election again. They wanted to, hamper that. I of course, didn't get the best of that deal with the Republicans. They were livid. Earlier in that same term, again, when I was in the same position of being the swing vote, I voted for some funding, for some bonding for ECMC, for the medical corporation, for their new emergency room. Again, the Republican stance was that the county executive wasn't for that, so we're going to be against it. And, I just didn't go along with that partisan game. And again, I paid a price. And that was 2 years earlier, because I lost the conservative endorsement for re-election for that. That was in 2017. Yeah, so this was ongoing.
A couple years in the making.
It was several years in the making, yes. Yeah. I was a bit of a maverick. I was a maverick. I embraced being a maverick, and you're a maverick so long, eventually it catches up with you, and you can no longer work with those people.
So has it changed your working relationship with the county government at all?
Yeah, I think I've been effective as comptroller. We've worked with folks at both parties. I don't think we've shown favor to either. As comptroller, people think of you as a watchdog, and you are. And we've done a number of audits. Specifically or most notably, the county clerk's office. And we found some major problems there. We found an employee who was stealing, he stole over $300,000. We found a counterfeit check there that they were unaware of that was over $300,000. We found that they were misdirecting some mortgage tax money to sending the wrong amount to various towns. I mean, there were a lot of problems there. And we encountered a lot of resistance when we did the audit there. But in the end, we've worked together with the county clerk, who again wasn't too happy that we were finding the things that we were finding or asking the questions that we were asking. But in the end, we did work with him. We made some suggestions. He went to the county legislature asking for some more people to do better accounting work, for newer software, and we've supported those requests. In fact, when the legislature was balking at them, we went to the legislature and we said, no, he really needs this. So we've worked together. And in the end, when you could work together with someone who, has been resistant to your involvement from the beginning, and you could work together to actually get things done and do the right thing for all the people of Erie County, I think that's probably the definition of success. And so we've been successful in working with others.
What's the most misunderstood aspect of the controller's role?
I think the most misunderstood aspect is that you're the chief accountant of the county. You're not. I mean, you're the chief financial officer, you're the chief auditing officer, but you're not doing all this work yourself. It's your staff that, I have great staff that do all the work for which I take all the credit. The real work of the comptroller himself or herself, no matter whether it's Democrat or Republican or whether it's me or my predecessor or whoever my successor is you're not actually doing the accounting yourself. You're hiring the people and you're overseeing their work. What you really are is you're a public administrator. It's a public administration position. It's just like the head of an airline. The president or the CEO of an airline is probably not a pilot. The head of a hospital corporation is probably not a brain surgeon. It's someone who can, bring their skills, hire the right people, get the people doing overseeing, coming in with the vision. And that's what this is. It's a job in public administration. And, one of the things I like to point out is I'm well suited for this because for the last several decades I've taught the public administration courses at Canisius College, and I'm now practicing what I preach.
So I want to ask you about, so you're seeking re-election, right?
Yes.
So what's that effort been looking like?
It's been kind of quiet so far because we don't have a primary. Things will heat up, I'm sure, in the next few months. We've got about 5 months to go to the election. We're running on our record, and I think we've got a great record to run on. I mean, we've been able to do the audits and save millions of dollars in taxpayer money through those audits. Every dollar, I like to point out, that we can save or that we can earn in interest in another part of our job is a dollar we don't have to raise in county property taxes. This saves county property taxes real dollars. We also have done a good job investing the money. When I came in to the job, our money was sitting, and you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, was earning 2 basis points in interest. That's 0.02%, not 2%, but 0.02%. We came in and we said, well, that's not going to work. And immediately we went around and started interviewing banks. We made banks compete against one another. We started investing in treasury bills, and immediately we were earning, more in interest. Now, we were helped certainly along the way by a rise in interest rates once the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates. But we were already well on our way to saving or earning millions of dollars more in interest well before the Federal Reserve started raising those interest rates. So through a combination of saving money through our audits, finding money, identifying money to be saved, doing a better job, becoming more efficient because of those audits, working with other people to make county government better, and then investing more wisely, I think we have a great record to run on, and we'll be running on the record in November.
Would you say that would be the legacy that you would leave from your office here?
You know what? I would hope that would be a part of it. But I hope that the biggest part of the legacy would be someone that folks could trust, someone that saw, as not being out to get this other elected official or that other elected official because, they're of the opposite party. I mean, I've been on both sides of the political aisle. I have friends on both sides. I don't think that good government should come down to which side of the aisle, Democrat or Republican, you're on. I think it should be about working together. And I hope that really would be the biggest part of my legacy, was a willingness to work together with everyone to make county government better, to make the community better.
Now, I want to ask you about the term good government. That's
Yes.
a term you use a lot.
It is. Thank you for noticing.
Yes. What does it mean?
It means government that, look, politics and government are inextricably entwined. You're going to have politics in government regardless. Good government is minimizing the politics, keeping an eye on the prize, so to speak. The prize of making sure that everybody is getting a fair shake, making sure that everybody feels good about what they're getting from government, making sure that government is efficient but also effective, and using tools that I teach in public administration classes that I teach at Canisius to achieve that. In the end, it's doing the right thing for the people. You're never going to make everybody happy, but everybody should feel at least that they were heard and that they were respected. Respect is a huge part of good government. Respect for the important work that government does, respect for the people, the bureaucrats, if you will, and I don't consider that a pejorative term. Normally you talk about those bureaucrats over there. No, people that work here are public servants. They do a good job, and we need to respect them. And of course, most of all, you need to respect the taxpayers, because they're the people paying for government, and they pay my salary, and they pay for everything else around here, and they should get their money's worth.
Now, I actually want to spin off from that to talk about the balanced reserves and, the budget fiscal oversight. Skip the section there. The 2025 county budget was influenced by Governor Hochul's budget, is that right?
Well, every budget that we have is influenced by every other budget, by the federal budget, by the state budget. One of the problems that you have in county government, especially in New York State, New York State as an example, is that much of your revenue is going to come from the federal government and from the state government. And they operate on different calendar years. The federal government starts their fiscal year on October 1st. Fiscal year 2026, right? We're in 2025 now, May of 25. Fiscal year 26 for the federal government will start October 1st. Even though it's October 1st, 2025, fiscal year 26 will start then. It's kind of like the car models. I'll be able to buy a 26 Ford in 25 or Chevy or whatever. So although we know for 3/4 of our fiscal year, which in Erie County is a calendar year, it starts January 1st and ends December 31st, January through September, we'll know what our federal aid is.
in October, November, December, that'll be a different federal budget. We won't be exactly sure of what we're going to get. Same thing with the state. The state operates on an April to March fiscal year. So yeah, when we were doing our budget in December for 2025, December of 24 for all of 25, we know what we're going to get in state aid for January, February, March. But after that, it's Hochul's, and the legislature's next budget that, we're going to be getting the aid. And if it's changed dramatically, we're going to either get more money than we thought, or more often than not, less money than we thought. And that can really have an impact. So when you budget, it's like guess your best. You're hoping you know what the revenues next year are going to be from the federal and state government, but you don't know. You also don't know what your sales tax is going to be. When we did the budget last year, we had, we weren't sure, or we didn't know that Donald Trump was going to come in and slap these tariffs all around. We didn't know that he was going to talk about the Canadians the way he has, and that's keeping Canadians from coming across the border, from spending their money in Erie County that we tax. We get sales tax revenue from. Is that going to make an impact? Is that going to make our guess, our estimate, too high? And are we going to lose sales tax revenue as a result? Well, you don't know. So it's a bit of an art science when you put together a budget, not knowing what your revenues are going to be, or your expenses for that matter. I mean, you don't know what the price of gas is going to be, 12 months down the road, and that can obviously have an impact on your budget, just like it has an impact on your personal budget.
Now, in the latest state budget, Governor Hochul decided not to increase local government funding. What's your reaction?
I don't know that we were expecting more money. We're just happy that the cuts weren't, more dramatic than they were where there were cuts, So I don't think that was anticipated. Where we're really worried, I mean, the big concern for us is not so much Governor Hochul's budget, because, the changes there were incremental. It's what's happening on the federal level. Areas like Medicaid and other social service programs. Because if holes are cut in the safety net, the federal safety net, guess what? It's going to eventually impact us here in Erie County, and those are people that we're going to have to take care of with local tax dollars.
So that could lead to tax hikes?
It could. Certainly it could, yes. I'm not saying it will, but, it obviously anything unanticipated like that can lead down the road to tax hikes. We would hope that it wouldn't. Certainly that's a last resort, but you can never rule that out.
Now, sales tax revenues did fall short last year as well.
Yes.
How did this shortfall affect your office's planning for this year?
Well, we planned on no growth in sales tax. And so far, we're pretty close to where we want to be in budget. In January, the first sales tax figures we got, we were down about 10% year to year. And we went, oh my God. I mean, if this keeps up, we're talking about being short by the end of the year, tens of millions of dollars. Now, shortly thereafter, in February, all of a sudden, sales tax rebounded. And it's been bouncing up and down. I was ready, if we had another month or two of below average sales tax revenue, I was ready to ring the alarm bell and tell everybody, hey guys, we've got a problem. We better start, curtailing our spending because we're not going to have the revenue to pay for it. Now, that hasn't happened yet. It's, to a certain extent, the sales tax figures so far this year have confounded a lot of us. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year or by the end of the summer, things fell off the table. But until that happens, I can't sound the alarm bell. I don't want to be the boy that cried wolf. But certainly we're watching that every month to month, when the money comes in from sales tax.
What's been the most difficult period that you've experienced as Comptroller with managing the budget or making sure that you guys are on budget?
I think the most difficult period for Comptroller was to be expected. It was the first year, because this is new and we haven't, we're bringing in our own team. And you know, we're left with a lot of vacancies. There was a lot of turnover, especially in our audit division early on. It took us darn near a year to find a permanent audit deputy. Very happy. We got Mary Hostler, former supervisor of the town of Evans. She's been fantastic. She has single-handedly almost, no, I won't say that because that doesn't do justice to the people she has working with her. But she's done a good job putting together a good team over there, and she's headed up these audits. Mentioned earlier, the clerk's audit, which found that counterfeit check, which found the employee embezzling the money. But there have also been other audits of the law department, which saved us, or we were able to identify about $1 million that we should be getting back. You know, we've done other audits that have been, you know, been super. But until we get that team in place, you know, we're kind of walking on eggshells. We had to fill some positions in various parts of the office, you know, and until you get to work with your team for a while and they know you and you know them, you're not going to be, you know, you're not going to be as productive as you could be otherwise. So yeah, I think we're doing well now.
Now, the county lowered the property tax rate this year. What factors contributed to that decision?
I think the increase in assessment. Now, when we talk about the lowering of property tax, and I talk about property taxes in some of my classes at Canisius. Talked about property taxes for years because a lot of people don't understand property taxes are a mystery and how we talk about them. And there is a difference between the levy, the tax levy, which is the absolute dollar amount of taxes that you're collecting, versus the rate, which is a rate per $1,000 of evaluation or valuation of a home that you're collecting. And that further gets specific into whether you're talking about assessed value or you're talking about real value, which is equalized assessed value. And the drop that the county executive and others have been touting is a drop on equalized assessed value. So as home prices have increased, you know, if the tax levy, the amount of money we're collecting, remains the same, then the tax rate on equalized assessment is going to drop just naturally by doing nothing. Now that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be paying less in taxes next year because you're going to be paying on a higher real value, which you get to from your assessed value, which people get, which is probably not. People look at the assessment on their homes, depending on the town, they're going to say, well, this is a lot less than what my home is really worth, you know. And the way we get from assessed value to real value is we divide through by something called the equalization rate. And this is going way over many people's heads already, including mine. And that's why they should take my classes at Canisius College, and I'll explain all that to them. But I've got some great PowerPoints. But we're not going to cover that in 30 seconds. But yeah, the simple answer to the question is the reason the taxes on equalized assessed valuation have dropped, the tax rate has dropped, is because home prices have increased. Plus, we've been getting, you know, decent sales tax revenue growth over the years. And I think the county executive has done a decent job of managing the budget.
Now, do you anticipate any major mid-year budget adjustments for this year?
I don't, unless something drastic happens this year on the federal level. I mean, or sales tax, you know, falls through the floor. I mean, if there's a precipitous drop in sales tax the second half of the year, yeah, I could see the need to curtail spending. If there are major changes to federal programs, social service programs that impact Erie County, and they leave us wanting for revenue where we thought that money would be coming from Washington and it's not coming anymore, yeah, we would have to change things. So right now it's steady as she goes. Things seem to be fine. But again, things can change in a heartbeat at the federal level.
Now, the fund reserves for Erie County have grown under your tenure. What's your philosophy for maintaining those reserves?
I think that when there are surpluses, as there were this past year, that much of that money should be socked away into our fund balance, which is, people refer to it as the rainy day account. And I think it's nice to have that there, because you never know when it might start raining. I mean, again, depending on what happens in Washington, we could be in for a storm later this year. You just don't know. And it's always good to have that money in reserve. It allows you to plug the gaps without having to raise taxes.
I want to ask you now about some of those cuts. So one of the cuts is to a lot of student aid programs, especially when it comes to research. Buffalo and Western and Erie County is definitely a big part of the research community in the state.
Yeah.
What has Erie County done to help aid in those help fund those projects, and what could they do?
Well, I think when you talk about the Buffalo area, I mean, we do have a major higher education presence. I mean, I'm part of it at Canisius College, or Canisius University now for years. We also have UB and Buff State, a number of other private colleges. And we also have Erie Community College, SUNY Erie, which is the college that we're most responsible for. And certainly over the years, we've poured a lot of money. I mean, I remember one of the big issues when I was on the county legislature was a new academic building for ECC North. And that was controversial at the time, and we put a lot of money into it and became a STEM building there. And certainly that's been a focus of a lot of the research at ECC. In terms of the important research that's been done at UB, especially at UB, I mean, that's more of a state issue. We provide, we're the county that hosts that, and we're the beneficiary of a lot of that, because we're certainly, the students that come from all over the world to UB, the faculty members that come from all over the world, they're here, they're buying homes, they're shopping in our stores, buying cars from our car dealers. We're getting sales tax from that and property tax. We're happy that they're here, and certainly we want the federal government to keep supporting that. These cutbacks, are worrisome. And they're worrisome just beyond what we might get in revenue. They're worrisome when you start talking about cutbacks in research into cancer and other diseases, as well as the other important research that's done here. It's mind-boggling that it's happening.
And so one of the moves, you talked about ECC South moved to Orchard Park. Were they already there before?
Oh yeah. ECC has been there forever. They're moving to a different campus with a different footprint. There are changes being made. One of the issues for years has been the fact that ECC has had 3 campuses, and they've acted in many ways autonomous from one another. There's the North Campus in Amherst, there's a city campus in downtown Buffalo, and in Orchard Park there's a South Campus. ECC has had financial problems for years, and I think that a decision has been made to scale back, at least on the amount of space that they're taking up at the South Campus, and they're moving to become more efficient. They're moving to different facilities. Of course, you're looking at some prime real estate right across or right adjacent to the new stadium. And there's talk about maybe some of the land that's currently being used for the South Campus there, has been used in the past, as maybe tying into the plans for development in Orchard Park, which would benefit not only Orchard Park, but Erie County as a whole. So those are the decisions made, by the Board of Trustees of the community college in conjunction with the county executive and the county legislature.
Are you concerned by their financial situation?
By the colleges?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It has been a concern for years. I mean, I think ECC, or SUNY Erie as they're now called, is a gem. It's a jewel, and we have to make sure that they survive. And much like Buff State, which has had some problems with enrollment in recent years and some serious financial problems, I think that they add a lot to the community, and those financial institutions are important. And we need to do everything we can to help them survive.
What does that entail?
In the case of ECC, it involves more targeted assistance from time to time, and sometimes that's in the form of one-time aid. In the county executive's mid-year budget corrections, budget amendments, he targeted some money to help the ECC Faculty Federation contract get settled. I think that's a judicious use, a one-time use. It's a one-shot, but it's an important one-shot. So I certainly am in favor of that.
Now, when it comes to, there's two questions I want to ask. But first of all, it's those people that are not originally from Erie County. They're coming in, like people like me, for example. This is outside of your range, but what do you think the county should do to encourage these people from outside to stay?
You know what? I think Erie County, we've worked in the time that I've been on the county legislature, we have worked on improving the quality of life in Erie County, be it through our health care, spending on health care, equity, especially spending money on our cultural institutions and our big attractions, whether it's the Albright Knox Gunderson Art complex there, whether it's the Buffalo Zoo, or whether it's the many small theater groups and other culturals. We have a vibrant cultural community here. And I think, when young people look to settle someplace, they're looking for jobs where they can make money, but they're also looking for a quality of life where if they're going to have a family and raise kids, they can have things there for the family to do and for themselves to do. And I think Erie County is doing well in that regard. And I think county government, at least in the time I've been involved, has been a big part of that.
What's the most underused What's the most underused resource in Erie County that you think younger people aren't taking advantage of?
I think that's a good question, and we're going to have to come back to that. I think if you want to take that question in a different direction, in terms of underutilized or where we need to focus more of our energies and are now just beginning to focus more of our energies, it's on our mental health institutions. I think that it's a national problem, and I think mental health is something that was exacerbated by the pandemic. I think it's impacted by social media, especially with children. We have kids unable to play with their friends. They're too busy bullying each other on social media, bullying or being bullied on social media. I think that like a lot of places, Erie County is trying to focus more and more of our resources to that problem. And I think that we have a decent mental health commissioner, and I think he's making great strides. But just like, we had a problem a few years back with the opioid epidemic. Like a lot of places, we were slow to react. But I think once we identified it as a problem, I was on the county legislature at the time, we were able to marshal a lot of resources into that. And I think we did as well as anybody.
We want to talk about the $300,000 fraudulent check.
Yeah.
What changes were implemented following this discovery?
Well, I think across the board, well, in the clerk's office, one of the problems they had was that they didn't have proper internal controls. There was no segregation of duties. That means the person, one person was doing everything, which meant no one was watching them. So now we have people, we have more positions there. We advocated for more accounting positions there. The clerk put in for a couple in his budget. We supported that request, and I think that they're happy and we're happy. And again, we worked together on getting that, and I think that's making them more efficient, more effective, and certainly more accountable than they were earlier. And I don't anticipate anybody will be stealing any more money there anytime soon.
Now, have you ever faced any political pressure to halt an audit?
I don't think so. I think that for various reasons we've postponed audits. For instance, last year early in the year, we were going to do a audit of real property tax services. And they came to us and they said, look, this is beginning of the year is when we're getting in all our property taxes. That's when people are paying their property taxes. Our people are really busy. Can we put that off? And we said, certainly, we put that off for a few months. Same thing has happened with the sheriff's office in a couple of cases. They've asked us to postpone audits for a few months, even half a year. And we said, yeah, certainly no problem. But no, to not do an audit, no. And if we were pressured, we wouldn't submit to that pressure. I mean, audits are audits. They're done for a reason.
The taxpayer check. How's it improved public access to county finances?
Well, it shows, that's not something that that this office came up with. That was done by one of my predecessors. It's been around for years. It just shows people it's transparent. It shows on our website people who we're writing checks to, where the money is going. And anybody can look that up any hour of the day and find out where we've spent our money.
If you were reelected, what are the 3 top priorities for your next term?
I think I want to continue what we've been doing. 2 of them would be to continue what we've been doing. Continue on the investment side, making as much money as we can for the taxpayers. Again, because every dollar we make through investments, a dollar we don't raise in property taxes. On the other side, the audit side, want to keep doing the audits, keep not finding people embezzling money or whatever, counterfeit checks. We've been able to find that. We're not looking for that necessarily, but to make county government more effective. The third thing I'd want to do is, from a bird's eye view, is to routinize some of the changes that we've made so that down the road my successors will be successful. They won't have to start from scratch. I'm not going to be comptroller forever. I hope to have one more term, and after that we'll be handing it off to someone else. And I hope that it'll be a seamless transition, that whoever it is, Democrat or Republican, that follows me, will be able to hand things off and make their transition a lot smoother than perhaps mine was.
Now, do you think as someone from Tonawanda, do you feel like suburban communities are fairly represented in Buffalo's media coverage?
I don't think anyone is as fairly represented as they should be or as they used to be. When I came to Tonawanda, while I was on the city council there was a Tonawanda News. It was a daily newspaper, and it covered board meetings and school board meetings and village board meetings in Kenmore. The Buffalo News at the time had a North Towns bureau, and they had a North Towns edition, and they covered town board meetings and city council meetings in the North Towns. They don't do that anymore. The Buffalo News is a specter of itself. There is no more Tonawanda News. People don't know what's going on in Tonawanda. You don't know as much about what's going on in Buffalo as you used to or Erie County. Now, Erie County, they do have a county reporter. She does a fantastic job, but I think a lot of things, you don't have the staff there, the number of reporters as you used to do. Because of the internet, they don't get the revenue that they used to from classifieds, from legal ads. It's been replaced by Craigslist and, the internet in general. So they've had to cut back. I'm glad we still have a daily paper in Buffalo. I think I subscribe to it. I subscribe to the print edition. I think it serves a very necessary function. I wish we still had a Tonawanda News. I don't like that so many of the people in Tonawanda have to rely on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter to find out what's going on, because there's, a lot of misinformation there. That's why I think what you're doing here, if it catches on, is fantastic. It's necessary. Maybe this is what fills the vacuum.